Hello and welcome to the second web chat in our e-identity series, where we'll be discussing the impact of a global trust network. We are joined again by John Bullard, Global Ambassador at Identrust, who is in charge of bank, government and corporate relations, focusing is mostly outside the US. And with his business banker background and many years of experience of promoting e-identity, very important to hear his thoughts. Last time we discussed the basics of e-identity, and today we're going to be discussing the dynamics and requirements of such a solution. It's not just a dream, it's already used in 15 countries.
Thank you, Jack. It's a pleasure to be here and delighted to explain what we're doing with the Trust Network and how I think it can help your growing readership as to how to manage risk in this space.
So what is the customer proposition here, John?
Well, Jack, in essence, it's very simple. It's the replacement of multiple different solutions.
All of these down here.
All the ones at the bottom of this slide, that for many of your clients, they probably open their drawer and they have a fistful of different credentials for different applications and different solutions with different organizations. The idea of what we're doing at the Trust Network is to actually deliver for the end customer an integrated solution, one where you're reusing the same credential for a whole variety of different applications at the top. Now, in the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see some of the key messages around what this will do. So single versus multiple platforms, it's interoperable versus point solutions, and it's a single versus multiple tokens and so on. So this is a very practical solution to a very, very real problem that I think your readership and your clients will be very familiar with.
But there are two vital aspects, aren't there?
Yes, to be of real value to the end customer, there's got to be clarity on these two distinct issues, both for electronic identity and for what are called e-signatures. The first issue is what aspects of identity are actually going to be managed, and the second issue is who will be covered by the identity management solution. Now, in both cases, you'll see an inverted triangle underneath, and the higher up that inverted triangle you go, the more complicated it becomes to manage the liabilities and to get the interoperability and so on that we all need to develop and trust over the internet. So the Identrust Trust Network was developed primarily to cope with the top of the inverted triangle, multiple communities of interest covering multiple legal jurisdictions. And to do that, we have a comprehensive operating rule set that is shown in the left-hand inverted column, inverted triangle, which covers policy, legal and liability issues, operational as well as technical issues. Now, the Trust Network can cover everything lower down the triangles, but its real uniqueness and its potential lies as a solution to those issues at the very top of each triangle.
So what does it look like in practice?
And that's a very fair question, Jack, because it's great to talk about it. But the reality is it's not dissimilar to the lessons that the banks and their customers have learned over the last 40 years or 50 years in terms of the development of the major global card schemes. So it's analogous in many ways to that and a 21st century version of those card schemes. At the bottom, you've got the Identrust scheme, if you will, that links the various banks, what we call the relying and issuing participant banks in this slide. It links the banks to a common set of operating rules, just as they are linked to a similar set of operating rules, for example, in a card scheme. And then between the bank and each customer, in this case, I've just put two customers, the subscribing customer and the relying customer. Each of those customers is linked to their bank by a customer agreement. Again, and very analogous to what we would see in a card scheme. So the message behind this is that the customer and the bank are the ones who work together, and they happen to use a common scheme with a set of common operating rules that effectively guarantees the interoperability across borders, across industry sectors, and across product. And in the right-hand side, you'll see how we manage the global legal interoperability by way of a contractual system that is baked into the scheme operating rules themselves. So in practice, that's what it looks like. It is, of course, highly scalable. You add more banks along the middle there. As and when a bank wishes to join up, it joins, signing up the same set of operating rules into the scheme, and then has a customer agreement with its customer. So it's a highly scalable model.
So this legal agreement doesn't change regardless of which type of bank or which type of company?
No, Jack. The strength of it lies in its uniformity. The banks, whether they are in the role of an issuing bank or whether they are in the role of a participating bank or both, in many cases, in fact, in all cases, they sign up to the same set of operating rules. So every financial institution that signs up knows exactly what their liabilities are and are not within the trust network. And by extension, so do each of their customers.
So what do these bank-issued credentials look like?
Well, they come in the form of digital certificates, which basically do four things. And you'll see they're access only, authentication, encryption, and electronic signatures. I won't run through each one of those because you can see them on the slide. But the net effect of these four capabilities are that they provide the end customer with privacy between customers. Two customers can interact in privacy. They provide authentication, so each customer can know that they are really dealing with who they think they're dealing with. They provide data integrity, so that as data moves from one party to the next, each party knows it hasn't been changed on the way. And finally, because of the legal and contractual structure of the overall scheme, they provide non-repudiation, so neither party can say, no, it wasn't me. That's the inherent strength of what these credentials are able to deliver.
And they have to be bank issued, do they? Is that a key requirement?
Yes, it is, Jack. It's really the premise upon which the trust network itself is built. It is premised upon the world's regulated financial institutions. Now, of course, there is no single global regulator. So as long as a financial institution is regulated by its local regulator, then that is fine as far as the scheme operating rules are concerned. Those rules are very clear as to what financial institutions can join in terms of size and eligibility and so on. And thus far, it is only really the commercial banks who are taking interest in becoming participating banks. But in theory, it is open to any regulated financial institution who wishes to issue credentials on to their customers and to do so under this liability model.
Yeah, some bankers feel that e-identity is going to be the crucial differentiator between the banks. But you're making it a level playing field, aren't you?
Yes, Jack, that's exactly what we are intending to do, to provide, if you have a look at the next slide, you will see that we provide essentially a layered service. At the bottom sits the Identitrust Trust Network, which provides its identity solution and validation service. Above that, you will have either corporations or governments, or in theory, you can get to individual citizens, but no bank has yet used it for individual citizens. But basically, you put on top of the platform the various entitlements and privileges of the corporate. And then depending upon, again, the corporate and the bank, do you wish to go over proprietary networks or do you wish to go over the open networks, the internet? It depends how you wish to communicate. The trust network can do both. The credentials can be used across either of those sorts of networks. And then at the top, you will see a series of sample applications of use cases. How can I use this token? And these are just at the top are a list of various applications that are already in place. For example, BACS in the UK is a major application of the trust network at this stage. So you can go on adding different uses to the same credential that underlies and underpins this model.
In today's world, what does it look like? Is this how it looks like?
Well, essentially, yes, Jack. And I use the word security by design deliberately because there's no way that the trust network would ever work if it was a proprietary solution. It is an open solution. It is based upon open and established standards. And if you look across each one of these verticals, you will see many familiar names that many of your clients will interact with every day. So what Identitrust is able to do is build an overall framework, and it says to each one of these vendors, look, if you provide your service that meets these overall operating standards, these overall operating rules of the scheme, then we as a scheme guarantee the interoperability between these various technologies. And then in the right-hand column, you'll see the applications. Again, how do I wish to use this? And it might be for government applications, it might be for industry applications, and there, for example, you will see BACS in the top left-hand corner. And Identrust itself, as the scheme operator, if you will, does also have a few what I would call ready-to-roll applications in things like, if you take Trust Prime, which is the second one in wrong to the left, that is the EBAM solution. That is a solution that if bank and customer want to use it, then it is already baked and ready to go straight on top of the platform. So that at the end of the day, this is customer and bank driven, and we, the scheme, provide the guaranteed interoperability across it.
But aren't people like Vasco or Gemalto or the banks going to say, we're going to stick with our scheme, there's no need to get into a global trust network? Why should they do it?
Well, I think that their customers will demand that happens. All of your clients, as you will know, are striving to survive in a highly competitive world where distance and verticals and geographies are not really a deciding factor anymore. They need interoperability. And they need, an analogy might be a common electricity gauge, or it might be a common railroad gauge of the 1800s. But interoperability is essential for the end users to operate and thrive in a world of ubiquitous electronic networks.
I mean, I've been in a meeting where a treasurer has got out the number of key fobs he's got for his 8 banks on SWIFT, or his 8 banks direct, and he's moved to just one key fob being a member of SWIFT. But he's also got all these other key fobs for other applications. How are you going to convince all these people?
It is a question of making certain that they understand the technology is not the problem. It's reuse of the technology, but it's providing the legal liability and the overall design of a trust network that is there to make the real business that your clients will want to do, designed to facilitate that, rather than have a box full of different credentials for different purposes. Of course, there will be various applications, various spheres of activity, for example, in defense or very, very high security, where you probably won't want to use a mainstream scheme, if you will. But I think, again, if I refer back to a MasterCard or Visa in the payments world, it is a lesson to us all that at the end of the day, this is about convenience in the hands of the end user.
And the governments, are they reacting well to this? Are they accepting this?
Yes, indeed. Government is an enormous area of growth for both the banks and for the scheme itself. Now, if you think about the banks and you think about the way the banks provide payment services to government organizations around the world today, this is essentially an extension of what they do. If you think about a payment as an application of trusted EID, then essentially what we're doing here is bringing EID to not only a payment world, but to a whole range of different applications, all of which can reuse the same underlying bank-issued credential.
So how are you going to get to the promised land? Why do you think this is possible? I know you've got a final thought here.
I think it is applicable. I think it goes a very long way to, from a banker's perspective, to actually reinventing the role of the bank in the 21st century. And if one does look back in history, one will see that banks have been, despite all the troubles of recent years, they are nevertheless trusted institutions. We leave our money with them. They do our payments for them. So the aim of this trust network is to leverage that trust capability of the banks. And if you look at the payments world, for example, today, billions of pounds or billions of dollars are passing around the world's networks every day. The idea is to build on that basic trust. And I always enjoy the quote from John Gall here, where he says that a complex system that works is invariably found to evolve from a simple system that worked. Now, I'm not saying that the world's payment systems are simple, but nevertheless, compared to managing multiple different credentials and multiple different uses of the world's electronic networks, this is a very good place to be starting from.
John, thank you. That's really interesting. And I think fundamental to the future of not just banks, but also day-to-day life. And with the banks being the core piece, the core role in e-identity, I think that's a very important thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. It's been a pleasure, and I agree exactly with what you said.